Good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, January 27th. It's time for episode 17 of The Last Admiral. We'll start where we left off on page 134 with Fu and Guildmaster Wraith battling the Coven Sisters. Okay. Surrender to me, Susu demanded, and I will recommend the lightest sentence for your crimes, life imprisoned. Wraith was no fool. Her words revealed that she did not see him. Silently, he backed away from the firelight and its heat, keeping the building between them. Crouching low, he began walking like a duck, rolling on fully bent thighs, his posterior just above the ground. Unsheathing his dagger, he concealed its glint inside of his left forearm in a reverse grip and began to work his way around, ever watchful for tripwires and other entanglements that he knew had to be there. It was then that a sizable tree trunk sailed through the burning building, exploding timbers and sending fire and sparks before itself. Leaping aside, Susu's invocations could not resist such an onslaught, and although no fire burned within her circle, she could not risk waiting there for another giant's attack. Retreating, she found Odo and tried to drag her behind the shelter of the nearest log house. Come on, Odo, we must join with... The point of a well-thrust blade pierced her body and exited her stomach. Looking down, she could scarcely believe it, as all her strength left her body. Slashing at Odo, Wraith then disappeared into the fog. Odo crawled out from under Susu and administered her last healing phial to her. Looking through the mist, they seemed alone. But by her word, the mist deepened around them. He can't find us now, she affirmed. My magic will heal us, and then we will destroy the Guildmaster and his entire house. Fu could no longer hear the two women. They seemed to have vanished into the mist. Suddenly, something stirred the leaves behind him. The undead had found him. A bony hand struck him hard on the shoulder, dislodging his spear and knocking him down. Rising to a knee, a second animated skeleton reached for his throat, but he fell back to avoid it. Scrambling away on all fours, he returned to his feet. His spear was out of reach, lying on the ground within the monstrous band. There were 6 of them all told, decayed corpses risen from shallow graves, soulless, cursed vessels forced by evil powers to obey their master's commands. Trying to swarm him, they charged in. Fu was desperate now, vastly out of his element, in a battle against foes that he assumed were beyond his power to defeat. One clawed him, tearing his flesh. Another clasped its hands around his neck, while a third struck him a hard blow from behind. Shock and pain coursed through his body. The undead were tireless, maniacal, and merciless. No help was coming. Wraith was surely in a fight all of his own. The skeletons were all around him, hitting him and beating him down. His war cry echoed through the jungle as he stood up hard, throwing his attackers away from himself. Retrieving his spear, he swung it like a club, shattering one monster into a pile of bones. Lashing out at them, he allowed his anger to rise. Giant strength coursed through him, and soon they were all defeated. Gasping for breath, he tried to calm himself, listening for signs of new struggles. He could not know what dangers awaited him in the village, but so far the gods were with him. Odo knelt over her sister, invoking the power of the goddess. She prayed for forgiveness and healing. Her magic was great. The healing power awoke within her. She could not have known that Wraith had not escaped into the mist, but rather had moved in silently behind them. She could see well with the divine eyesight granted to her by the goddess, but even the clearest vision is limited to its natural range. Wraith cut her throat and pierced her heart before her spell was complete. Her sister suffered a similar fate, and they both died quickly. No doubt your queen will raise you from the dead, Wraith predicted, but neither of you will cast any more spells this day. In an instant, he whirled into the fog and was gone. Fu entered the village, holding his spear in its ready position. He felt his way along as if he was sneaking up on a deer. He knew that he had heard something off to the west, and so he worked his way toward it. His weapon seemed like a small thing to him now. Would it be enough against a man with a sword who knew how to use it, he wondered? Suddenly, there was a startled shout from within the mist, followed by a loud splashing sound. A woman's laughter came soon afterward. Somehow, he knew that Wraith was either now dead or in some terrible predicament. A sizable boulder once used as a platform for cleaning fish stood before him. Box-shaped, it weighed over 200 pounds. Returning his spear to the weapon's thong wrapped around his torso, he picked the boulder up easily and made his way toward the sound of the woman's voice. So easily you were deceived, so Mong ridiculed. Now you will finally come to justice, just like all the other rats of the house of Oki. Laughing boisterously, she clapped the black dragon symbol on her breast. Your soul should suffer beneath the fangs of Arachnodon, but you're not good enough even for that. Well done, sister, Zhao said, standing beside her. We shall waste no more time with him. Looking down into the dark depths of the deep pit that he had spent several days digging, he joined her in jubilation. With a mighty heave, he dropped a stoutly made woven bamboo cover into the pit and wedged it in, thus blocking any chance of Wraith's escaping. Wounded and disoriented from the fall, Wraith clawed his way to his feet. Ankle deep in mud, he struggled to focus his eyes. Doing a quick inventory, his sword was still in its scabbard, and his knife had fallen with him. Luck alone had prevented him from falling on its exposed blade. Giving little thought to his tormentors above him, he sought escape. The pit was somewhat narrow, approximately 3 feet in diameter, but deep, at least 30 feet below ground. Bracing his feet against one wall and his back against the other, he tried to ascend the earthen walls of his prison, but the soil was muddy and of weak composition, and he could not climb it. With a mighty leap, he nearly reached the bamboo grate, but even with the strength that he possessed with the girdle of Skygate, he could not attain it. A valiant effort, Guildmaster, Zhao taunted. I would have enjoyed challenging you to a master's duel, but it seems that we won't have the chance. It's a pity. Finish him, Fiddler. Fiddler? He pondered too late, suddenly realizing that he was not alone in the pit, as a large arachnid landed on his exposed neck and bit him. Instantly, waves of nausea flowed through his body, and he blacked out. It is done, Master, Fiddler rasped. The man is down. Well done, my friend. You did a fine job. Come here, quickly now. Turning about on his hanging strand of silk, Fiddler climbed up with all the natural ease with which spiders can do so. Once he was out, Fiddler climbed onto Zhao's shoulder for a playful petting, as if he were a child's loving puppy. So Mong stood over the pit gloatingly. Wraith Vertorior will never challenge the coven again. Raising her power, she invoked the blessed will of the goddess, and the pit rapidly filled with water. Soon the hole was full to the brim, well beyond the now submerged grate. Both poisoned and drowned, like all of the other rats of your house, it It's nothing less than you deserve. Where have Susu and Odo gone? Zhao asked. We still have to hunt down the one that was with him. Somong communed for a moment and grew fearful. I cannot sense them any more. Something has happened. Fu was so close to them now that he heard them clearly, although he could not understand their words. Fearing the worst, he weighed his options. Damn this accursed mist, Zhao said. And immediately afterward, a massive object sailed within inches of his head. Ducking low, he scrambled away, finding some cover behind a clump of coconut trees. There is a giant here! Somong had had enough of the fog. With a wave of her hand, a powerful wind rose up, banishing the mist before it, revealing both the village and Fu. It is no giant, Zhao, just a little islander boy. Fu's warrior spirit was strong. If this were the moment of his death, he would not disappoint his ancestors. Hefting his spear, he shouted and charged the witch. Somong waved her hands and spoke a single word. Instantly, Fu's limbs were no longer his to control. Try as he might, he was paralyzed, as surely as if he had taken the poison of the arrow frog. Approaching him casually, the witch leaned in and kissed him fully. You will make a fine slave once you are broken. Over here, Zhao cried. He's killed them. No, Somong screamed. There is still time. I will save them. Kneeling beside her sister, she prayed, and soon the light of life began to shine within the faces of the fallen. Fu, fully conscious but helpless to act, prayed to his own god. They had failed utterly, and soon things would be even worse. Cold water wrenched him back from the abyss. Mithridates' antidote had saved him, and the girdle of Skygate had prevented him from drowning. Swimming upward, he encountered the bamboo grate. Turning upside down, he braced his feet and hands against it and tested its strength. With slow pressure, he increased his effort, trying to avoid disturbing the water's surface. The bamboo twisted, bent, and finally collapsed. Swimming to the top, he peered over the water's edge hesitantly. The assassin was before him at last. Fu was close by, frozen by dark Elfar magic. Clambering out of the pit, Wraith gained his feet. Chambering his arm for a throw, he invoked the power of the girdle, and a bolt of lightning appeared in his hand. He unleashed it, and then another, and another. Only Zhao had the speed and awareness to dodge it. Somong, totally engaged in communion, was defenseless against it, as were her unconscious sisters. All three of them died together in a smoking pit of ruin. Zhao raced into the jungle, specifically into the area of it that he had prepared. It seems that we will have our duel after all, Zhao quipped, guild master of Oki. Fu reclaimed his body soon after the witch's death. Make sure that they are dead, Fu, Wraith directed. The assassin is mine. Wraith's voice was absolute, commanding. Fu obeyed him implicitly, but fully intended to follow him once his task was complete. Wraith launched a lightning bolt into the woods where last he had heard Zhao's voice, knowing that his enemy was long gone. Drawing his blades, he entered the jungle at a distant point and crept in. Well-hidden tripwires, pitfalls, and other snares crisscrossed every major trail in a gigantic maze of waiting death. Slipping past them one by one, he ducked just in time to avoid a flying crossbow bolt. Hidden amid the trees, he could finally see his enemy. Using himself to lure Wraith in, he fired his enchanted weapon, loosing several bolts in a succession without reloading. The guildmaster was a marvel of skill. Leaping over a spiked pit, he tumbled through a maze of tripwires, unleashing a hail of spears, falling logs, and poisoned spikes, all the while avoiding Zhao's best attempts to kill him. "Well done, Vittorio," Zhao praised, "but I have some lightning of my own." Hefting a pair of enchanted javelins, he hurled them one by one, not intending to strike the guildmaster, but instead to release the mechanism that held his remaining traps in check. The jungle exploded around Wraith in a wave of flying projectiles, the likes of which he had never seen. Leaping, twisting, running. Spinning, parrying, and ducking. He avoided the worst of them, and certainly no being less than a god could have remained unscathed. His armor deflected countless stones, spikes, and poisoned arrows. His exposed flesh was cut, torn, twisted, and battered. His ribs were beaten and cracked, but he never stopped moving. When the dust had cleared, he was but a few paces from Zhao Kunrung, the hidden dragon. Unsheathing his blades in one instantaneous, highly trained movement, Wraith held them on guard and closed the gap. Zhao abandoned his crossbow and drew his own sword. Enchanted with powerful magic, its form was that of a straight-bladed knight sword with a heavy crossguard and a keen edge. A gauntlet protected his left hand, but stealth required softer garments, and so a simple leather cuirass was all that protected his body. Barely raising his sword in time, Wraith's cut missed his throat by a fraction of an inch. Grabbing his sword's blade with his gloved hand, he wielded it in a manner similar to that of a wooden staff, parrying and twisting away from Wraith's whirling blades. The guildmaster was unusually strong, certainly by magic, but he was clearly hurt. Bleeding in dozens of places, Zhao could see his poisons at work in him. Zhao's fencing skills were quite good, and in truth, he had never before met his own equal. Wraith was beyond him, of that he had no doubt, but cunning and a willingness to use any tactic to win had won him countless victories in the past. His ego was certain that this battle would be no different. Shifting all his skills to defense, he backed away repeatedly as Wraith advanced. His poisons just needed a little more time, and then the fight would then be over. Wraith never took his eyes off his opponent. His body rebelled against him, so full of toxins and pains that only his powerful will kept him on his feet. He considered using the girdle, but it would serve neither his honor nor his soul. Desperation would not serve him. Neither reckless action nor sudden bravery would accomplish anything but ruin, and so he set his teeth and pressed on, praying to the gods of luck that his skill would carry him through. Zhao could not understand why Wraith was not dying. In fact, he seemed to have somewhat recovered. Nevertheless, he still had one final trap, one card up his sleeve yet to play. In just a few more paces, he would reach it. The sisters had helped him with its construction. No trap had ever been devised so well, a blend of magic and mechanics that should finally rid the world of Wraith Vittorio. Lunging backward, he slashed the vine that triggered it. The earth, which had seemed so solid, like nothing more than the natural forest floor beneath him, vanished. Beneath Wraith was a black, lightless void, whether to somewhere or nowhere he could not know. A few forest vines hung down near him. His reaction time was perfect. Dropping his dagger, he caught one, and it held. Hanging above the void, certain doom lay below him. Zhao sheathed his dagger and stood gloatingly. "A valiant effort indeed, Guildmaster," Zhao said. "Better this fate, I think, than the one my sisters had in store for you. I'll make it quick." Grasping something next to the skin of his forearm, he drew forth a long needle. "Somehow, my poison hasn't killed you, but no one could possibly withstand the bite of the Guer Arakul twice." It was then that Fiddler crawled out from beneath Zhao's cloak and deposited some venom on the point of an already poisoned needle. "Goodbye." As he reared back to throw it, his arm suddenly stiffened. Looking down, He saw a 6-inch spear point covered in blood and protruding from his chest. The needle tumbled from his grasp as he sought in vain to remove the barb. Struggling to stand, he grasped his sword hilt and pointed at Wraith. "My dying wish is that you will die with me this day." Falling forward, as his life departed, he disappeared into the pit, along with one islander's spear and a very unfortunate spider. Wraith was never happier to see any soul in his life than he was in that moment to see Fu. "I thought that I told you to leave the assassin to me. You can punish me later." Working fast, Fu cut a long, sturdy vine away from a tree and held it over the void for his friend. Sheathing his sword, Wraith grabbed it, just as a massive, scaly hand reached up through the darkness and grabbed his right leg. Fu caught Wraith's wrist and braced his feet near the lip of the void. A terrible roar emanated from the beast that held him, like the angry cry of a distant, enraged lion, and yet it lingered hauntingly near. "Don't you let me go, Fu." And that's where we're going to leave it, at the top of page 142. And next time we'll find out if Guildmaster Wraith survives this horrible predicament. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the battle between Fu and Wraith and the Coven Sisters and the Guildmaster Assassin. Have a great night.